My name is Christopher Gori, the Information Officer at Community Water Alliance. Community Water Alliance is a civic society organization that does work around 3 program areas, namely WASH, water sanitation and hygiene. We focus on environment issues as well as climate issues. We offer quite a number of services which include civic trainings and capacity building for communities and even policymakers. We do hydro intervention, drilling of boreholes to complement water delivery in communities. We also do monitoring and observe, especially when talking about how the local authorities operate or even the national government. What is your stance on housing cooperatives that are mushrooming on wetlands? Our position is anchored on 3 important issues. Number 1, the need to promote at maximum level the services offered by wetlands. Number 2, the changing climatic patterns, and on this one we focus at climate change resilience. And number 3, the provisions of the law. Wetlands play a critical role in water service provision, and if we consider the services that are offered by wetlands, you would see that they purify water, raw water. They also do carbon sequestration. They provide carbon sequestration services. They also recharge streams that feed into the lake. So when it comes to issues to do with purification of raw water, you would find out that Harare itself requires about $3 million every month to produce 400 megaliters per day. That alone shows that wetlands are very critical and they are very important in terms of reducing the cost in terms of water purification after having played their role to purify water free of charge. On that note, the 2013 Constitution of Zimbabwe guarantees environmental rights under Section 73 and Section 97, subsection 5 of the Constitution of the EMA Act, in fact, provides for safeguarding against environmental degradation through the requirements of the EMA Environmental Management Impact Assessment. From this, you can clearly see that it is very important, and Community Water Alliance is against the mushrooming of housing or structures that are being constructed at wetlands, because this gives a negative impact when it comes to water safe delivery. Do you think that our local government is doing enough in terms of safeguarding wetlands? If you want to see whether the government is doing enough on safeguarding wetlands, we clearly see, or we simply look at the status of the wetlands in Zimbabwe. Recently, we had the former Minister of Finance, Terence Mkupe, who opened roads for building constructions at Haka wetland in Mabvuku. That alone shows that whether the government is committed to preserve this important water infrastructure. If we look at the site, Haka site, wetland, it is a Ramsar site, and it was designated that it should not be disturbed, it should be protected and preserved. But we would find that the minister has already started doing something there, distracting that particular wetland. I can also give another example on the Chinese Mall that was constructed close near the National Sports Stadium. That alone shows you whether the government is committed or is putting in place mechanisms to safeguard wetlands. I've just mentioned those, just a few. There are some efforts that are being made by EMA, which is a government institution, to develop and gazette a wetlands map. We applaud that move because it gives room, and we expect that in terms of planning, it should inform spatial planning that fits into the master plan. We expect local authorities or the government to incorporate their planning in terms of the wetlands map that has been gazetted. These maps ultimately gives the local authorities and the government to make sure that whenever they are doing planning, they should look at the map and make sure that they reserve those areas that are earmarked to be preserved as wetlands. If we look at the reality on the ground, you would find out that most of the houses that were swept by floods during the last rainy season, the majority of the houses were constructed at wetlands, and that is giving a negative impact to citizens who have been allocated or who have invaded those particular wetlands, and that has forced development partners to program around giving assistance to victims of floods in urban areas. On a legislative side, there has been a cry to have the environmental impact assessment framework and formula in the principle of separation of powers. The current framework gives room and opportunity for the proper developer to engage or to pay the consultants to determine whether it is possible to build or not to build on a wetland, and that compromises the whole system because there is room for corruption. So in this case, we are saying there's need for separation of powers, separation of duties, so that we ensure that we get proper EIAs. Right, number 3. Rural to urban migration is increasing each and every year. Informal settlements are on the rise in urban areas. What needs to be done in order to address the problems? Is the government doing enough to address the situation? The issue of informal settlements can only be solved if we address root causes. And the root causes, we all know that everyone needs decent shelter or accommodation. Decent shelter or accommodation, and this can only be solved by introducing skyscrapers or building flats, so that we accommodate quite a number of people using the resources that are available. That is, if those resources are used properly to construct flats. Development of rural areas and growth point will also reduce the number of people who migrate from the rural areas into urban areas. So there's need to focus at developing, especially just during this period where devolution funds are being allocated in different parts of the country. So those funds can be used to develop areas like growth points and rural areas, so that people should not focus at migrating from their areas to urban areas. We also need to revisit the culture of politics. Most of the invasions at wetlands are getting blessings from politicians. As long as people are loyal to their political parties, usually they leverage on that and occupy pieces of land without following due processes, and that is affecting the water infrastructure, because they are doing that out of impunity. So we encourage citizens to follow due processes when it comes to issues to do with acquiring a piece of land, be it for local authorities or state land. As urban cities grow, the demand for water rises, and competition between water for human consumption and agriculture is intensifying, demand to a point that is no longer sustainable. Do you think with the rate at which wetlands are being abused, we will have a normal environment in 20 years' time? The rate of abuse of wetlands points a gloomy picture. The environment will be degraded and destroyed if we continue to deplete wetlands. So in this case, we need to preserve these wetlands so that we make sure that we do not risk to embark on serious water challenges in the next 2 decades. So it is very important to make sure that we protect and preserve the current wetlands that we have. Number 5, on the issue of Harare City Council awarding residential stands on wetlands, how far have you gone to lobby for the protection of wetlands in the capital? We have built citizen agents to entrench community stewardship on wetlands preservation. We cannot claim to have done all that needs to be done, but the nucleus is there within communities, and the nucleus of informed citizens that link wetlands preservation to water service delivery, flood attenuation and climate change resilience. Secondly, we instituted public interest litigation to force authorities to comply with the legal provisions to protect wetlands. We won the cases, but we cannot litigate on every case, considering the amount of and effort and resources that are required for litigation. The gazetted wetland maps are a product of our efforts with other CSOs. It's a product of consecuted advocates on the wetlands preservation. We have petitioned Parliament law reform, and in some instances, Parliament produced reports with recommendations to the executive arm of the state. We are in the process of forming a national wetlands preservation forum composed of citizens from different CSOs across the country. This structure will be anchored provincial forums that will be chaired by residents associations. We will drive a national agenda very soon around the issue of wetlands preservation to ensure that we safeguard the water infrastructure that we have at the moment.
For these and other stories, visit our website www.263chat.com. Follow us on Twitter @263chat and like our Facebook page 263chat.